Subscribe for more historical analysis. Dwight David Eisenhower entered the European War as a staff officer and became its central coordinator because he demonstrated something rare in modern conflict: the ability to unify political demands, national rivalries, and military power into one operational engine. His rise was not built on battlefield glory but on an exceptional capacity to manage vast systems. By 1943, this made him the American most trusted by both Roosevelt and Churchill. When the Allies prepared to return to Western Europe, he became the commander responsible for the entire effort. Eisenhower defined the central problem of the European theater clearly. The Allies had manpower, industry, air power, and shipping, but none of these mattered unless they could be coordinated into a single, overwhelming assault. Germany had interior lines, concentrated defenses, and experience. To defeat this, the Allies needed mass, timing, synchronized landings, and a command structure free of friction. Eisenhower's mission was to merge multiple armies, multiple air forces, and two governments into one coherent plan. That plan became Operation Overlord. From his headquarters, Eisenhower enforced the principle that strategy must serve a single purpose: opening and expanding a secure lodgment in France. Everything else, bombing priorities, naval allocation, deception operations, and logistical flow, had to be shaped around that objective. He insisted that no national agenda could override the requirements of the invasion. This kept the Anglo-American alliance unified at a time when mistrust, disagreements, and personal rivalries could easily have fractured the entire effort. Eisenhower's preparation for D-Day began with one foundation: air supremacy. The invasion would fail unless Allied aircraft controlled the sky completely. Under his direction, long-range fighters attacked German aircraft production and fuel stocks. Bomber commands crippled transportation networks, and tactical air forces practiced coordinated strikes to isolate Normandy. By early 1944, German air power in the region was severely degraded. This air dominance created the conditions in which an amphibious assault could even be attempted. Eisenhower also approved a massive deception program designed to mislead German intelligence about the invasion site. This became Operation Fortitude. Through false radio traffic, dummy divisions, and controlled leaks, the Germans were convinced that the main landing would occur at the Potomac. Eisenhower understood that the deception must continue after the landings to prevent German armor from rushing into Normandy. The success of this effort delayed German response and gave the Allies the critical time they needed on the beaches. As planning continued, Eisenhower oversaw an unprecedented logistical system. Millions of tons of equipment had to be moved, sorted, stored, and shipped. Amphibious craft were in limited supply. Every allocation had operational consequences. Eisenhower balanced competing demands from Army and Navy commanders and forced the staff to focus on the essentials: landing strength, follow-up divisions, artillery supply, and beach maintenance units capable of turning a coastline into a functional port under fire. By June 5, 1944, the invasion force was ready, but the weather was not. Storms threatened to break up the landing craft and scatter the airborne drops. Eisenhower listened to meteorological reports through the night and made the final decision himself. He approved the invasion for June 6. That choice remains one of the most consequential decisions of the war. With it, he committed over 150,000 men to the largest amphibious landing ever attempted. When the invasion began, Eisenhower's headquarters received fragmentary reports from all sectors. Some beaches were progressing, others were under severe pressure. Omaha Beach in particular suffered heavy casualties and near. Eisenhower did not interfere tactically. He maintained strategic control and allowed the ground commanders freedom to adapt. The separation of responsibilities, firm strategic direction paired with tactical independence, was a hallmark of his command style. It allowed the Allied armies to stabilize their positions and expand the beachhead hour by hour. Eisenhower understood that the beaches were only the opening move. The true test would come in the days that followed, when the Germans attempted to counterattack before the Allies could bring in fresh divisions, armor, and artillery. His first priority after the landings was to secure the link between all 5 beaches. Once the lodgment was connected, the Allies could deploy massed firepower and build the momentum required for a breakout. Eisenhower focused on flow, not on individual tactical fights. He knew that if reinforcements and supplies reached Normandy at the planned rate, the German defense would collapse under sheer operational weight. To achieve this, Eisenhower relied on the artificial harbors known as These prefabricated structures were towed across the channel and assembled off the beaches, creating temporary ports capable of receiving thousands of tons of material each day. The system was fragile and vulnerable to weather, but it provided the Allies with a means to sustain operations until the capture of Cherbourg and other usable ports. Eisenhower followed the daily tonnage reports personally. He understood that logistics, not heroism, would determine success in France. Eisenhower also had to manage the personalities and ambitions of powerful subordinates. Bernard Montgomery pushed for bold maneuvers and centralized control of land operations. George Patton demanded rapid employment of armored forces and argued that speed would break the German line. Omar Bradley favored a broad front approach that maintained pressure across the entire German defensive system. Eisenhower balanced these views without allowing any one commander to dominate the coalition. His authority came not from dramatic gestures, but from calm persistence and an unwavering commitment to the common objective. Through June and July, the fighting in Normandy turned into a brutal struggle through the Bukhaji countryside. Narrow lanes, hedgerow walls, and concealed German positions slowed the Allied advance. Eisenhower resisted pressure to shift strategy toward risky deep penetrations. Instead, he maintained steady attrition, knowing that German losses in men, tanks, and fuel could not be replaced. Air power supported this method by crushing German movement during daylight and isolating the battlefield. Eisenhower's patience preserved Allied strength for the decisive operation to come. That operation was the breakout from Normandy. While British and Canadian forces attacked around Caen to tie down German armor, the Americans prepared a concentrated assault west of St. Lay. This became Operation Cobra. Eisenhower approved the plan because it aligned with his principle of creating overwhelming force at a single point. Thousands of bombers struck German positions in a narrow corridor, followed by a rapid ground thrust. The German front collapsed. Patton's newly activated Third Army surged into the open countryside, exploiting the breach with speed and aggressiveness. Eisenhower now shifted the coalition from a beachhead army to a continental pursuit force. He emphasized flexibility and rapid adaptation. With German defenses disintegrating and the Allies approaching the Seine, he ordered all formations to maintain pressure. The goal was not merely to liberate French territory, but to destroy German military capacity in the west. The Falaise pocket became the focus of this effort. Though some German units escaped, the destruction inflicted there crippled their ability to form a coherent line again, as the Allies crossed the Seine and entered northern France. Eisenhower's challenge shifted from breaking German defenses to sustaining a high-tempo advance across long distances. Ports were scarce, fuel usage was enormous, and supply lines stretched hundreds of kilometers. Eisenhower understood that momentum was essential, but he also saw the danger of outrunning logistics. He refused to commit the entire Allied effort to a single narrow thrust. Instead, he insisted on a broad advance toward Germany that maintained pressure across the entire front. This decision prevented the Germans from concentrating their limited reserves against any single Allied army. Political considerations also returned with force. De Gaulle demanded recognition of French authority and control of Paris. Eisenhower allowed the French 2nd Armored Division to enter the city, understanding that political legitimacy was vital to post-liberation stability. He also coordinated with the British government on future operations while managing Roosevelt's expectations for rapid progress. Eisenhower's skill as a diplomat was as important as his skill as a strategist. By late summer, the Allied armies stood on the borders of Belgium and the Netherlands. The German army had suffered catastrophic losses, but the war was not yet over. Eisenhower's challenge was to bring the full weight of Allied power into Germany, while preventing any resurgence of German operational capability. He prepared for the final phase of the European war, with the same principles that had guided him since Normandy: unity of command, overwhelming mass, logistical discipline, and relentless pressure. Eisenhower's advance into Belgium and the Netherlands exposed the central tension of the Allied campaign: speed versus the rapid pursuit after Normandy had shattered German formations, but it also consumed fuel and ammunition at a rate no supply system could maintain indefinitely. Eisenhower recognized that without additional ports, the Allied armies would face operational paralysis. Antwerp became the critical objective. Its capture offered a major deep-water facility, but the Scheldt estuary remained in German hands, preventing the port from being used. Eisenhower pressed for operations to clear the estuary, seeing that without Antwerp the Allied drive into Germany would stall. At the same time, Montgomery proposed Operation Market Garden, a bold airborne offensive intended to seize a corridor across the Netherlands and open a direct route into the Ruhr. Eisenhower approved the plan because it represented a chance, though risky, to shorten the war. He also understood that coalition warfare required giving subordinate commanders opportunities to execute their concepts. When Market Garden failed, Eisenhower absorbed the political fallout and prevented the setback from fracturing Anglo-American cooperation. His steadiness kept the alliance intact as winter approached. By autumn 1944, the German army had retreated to the West Wall, also known as the Siegfried Line. Eisenhower evaluated the entire front and determined that the enemy was weakening but still capable of local counterattacks. He continued to enforce a broad front strategy, applying pressure along the entire German defensive network. This approach prevented the Germans from concentrating their remaining armored reserves. American, British, and Canadian armies pushed toward the Rhine simultaneously, maintaining operational tempo. Despite severe logistical constraints and deteriorating weather, Eisenhower's leadership faced its greatest test in December, when Germany launched a massive surprise offensive through the Ardennes. The Battle of the Bulge threatened the cohesion of the Allied line and sought to split American and British forces. Eisenhower reacted with clarity and discipline. He rapidly reinforced the threatened sectors, redirected reserves, and reassigned divisions between armies without hesitation. He trusted his commanders to stabilize the situation while he focused on the operational framework. His ability to remain calm under pressure reassured the entire command structure. During the Bulge, Eisenhower demonstrated another quality often overlooked: his willingness to adapt. When the German attack created a deep salient, he shifted from defense to counteroffensive the moment the enemy momentum slowed. Patton's Third Army executed a rapid turn north to relieve Bastogne, a maneuver Eisenhower enabled through early planning and logistical prioritization. By managing both the macro and micro elements of the campaign, he ensured that the German offensive exhausted itself without achieving any strategic gain. As the weather improved and Allied air power returned to the skies, Eisenhower coordinated a unified counterstroke. He directed American, British, and Canadian armies to compress the salient from north and south. German losses in armor, fuel, and manpower were devastating. The failure of the Ardennes offensive effectively removed Germany's last chance to alter the course of the war. Eisenhower had anticipated this possibility for months. His insistence on maintaining strong reserves and a broad defensive posture prevented a localized shock from becoming a strategic disaster. In early 19, Eisenhower returned to the problem that had defined his strategy since Normandy: how to bring overwhelming force to bear on Germany's core industrial regions. With the Rhine River as the final major barrier, he prepared a coordinated crossing operation. He allowed Montgomery to execute a large-scale assault in the north, while supporting American crossings in the central sector. Eisenhower's goal was not to achieve glory through a single dramatic maneuver, but to ensure that all Allied armies advanced in a synchronized manner that prevented German recovery. Once the Rhine was breached, Germany's position collapsed rapidly. Eisenhower emphasized the destruction of remaining German forces rather than symbolic objectives. He rejected proposals to seize Berlin, judging the cost too high and the strategic value limited given Soviet proximity. Instead, he focused on eliminating the German armies in the field, securing Western Europe, and preventing any organized resistance. His decisions reflected a practical, operational mindset that prioritized final victory over prestige. Eisenhower also recognized the humanitarian dimension of the final campaign. As Allied forces liberated concentration camps, he ordered thorough documentation of the atrocities. He wanted the world to see the evidence plainly, fearing that future generations might doubt the scale of what had occurred. This decision shaped post-war memory and demonstrated his understanding that leadership extends beyond the battlefield. By April, Allied forces had encircled the remaining German armies. Eisenhower maintained communications with the Soviet command to prevent accidental clashes as the two coalitions converged. His careful coordination ensured that the final collapse of Nazi Germany occurred without miscalculation between the victors. When Germany surrendered in May 1940, Eisenhower had accomplished the central task assigned to him: to unify, direct, and sustain the mightiest coalition. Military effort in history. Eisenhower's responsibilities did not end with the military defeat of Germany. As supreme commander, he had to manage the transition from combat operations to occupation and stabilization. His first priority was to restore basic order across the devastated regions of Western Europe. Millions of displaced civilians, starving populations, collapsed transportation networks, and shattered cities required immediate intervention. Eisenhower directed Allied resources toward emergency food shipments, medical support, and the reestablishment of essential services. He understood that military victory meant little without the restoration of functioning societies. Simultaneously, Eisenhower oversaw the disarmament of German forces on an unprecedented scale. Entire divisions surrendered in place, bringing vast quantities of weapons, vehicles, and infrastructure under Allied control. Eisenhower's staff developed procedures to collect, secure, and neutralize these resources quickly. This prevented sabotage, guerrilla resistance, and the accidental recycling of German material into post-war chaos. His methodical approach ensured that the end of combat did not give way to uncontrolled disorder. Eisenhower also implemented the denazification policy. He insisted that political structures must be purged of those who had supported the Nazi system. This effort required coordination across numerous administrative levels, from local councils to regional governments. Eisenhower balanced firmness with pragmatism, removing dangerous elements while allowing trained professionals to maintain essential civilian functions. His approach avoided both excessive leniency and destabilizing purges that could have crippled reconstruction. Relations with the Soviet Union became another central issue. As the war ended, political tensions surfaced rapidly. Eisenhower remained committed to maintaining professional military cooperation, while avoiding provocations that could escalate into conflict. He resisted pressure to use American forces to confront Soviet advances, and instead emphasized clear communication and well-defined occupation boundaries. His measured handling of these interactions helped prevent misunderstandings. During a volatile period when small incidents could have spiraled into crisis, Eisenhower also became a key figure in shaping the historical interpretation of the war. He wrote detailed reports, preserved operational records, and encouraged transparency about Allied actions. His documentation of Nazi crimes ensured that evidence would survive intact for judicial proceedings and historical study. By insisting on thorough recording, he contributed to the creation of an accurate, authoritative account of World War II's final phase. Although Eisenhower left active command shortly after the surrender, his experience in coalition leadership transformed him into a national figure of exceptional stature. The American public viewed him as the calm, disciplined commander who had orchestrated the largest joint operation in American and Allied history. His integrity, organizational skill, and refusal to pursue personal glory earned him a reputation as a leader who placed mission and unity above ambition. In the post-war years, Eisenhower served as Army Chief of Staff before becoming President of Columbia University. His wartime leadership also positioned him for future political roles. By the early 1950s, both major American political parties sought him as a presidential candidate. They saw in him a unifying figure capable of navigating the early Cold War's complexity. His wartime achievements gave him credibility on global security, and his command of the NATO alliance reinforced his standing as a leader who understood the challenges of deterrence and collective defense. Eisenhower's wartime philosophy rested on clear principles: the primacy of coalition unity, the importance of logistics, the value of air superiority, and the necessity of overwhelming force at decisive moments. These principles shaped Allied success in Europe and became foundational concepts in Western military doctrine. His legacy is not defined by dramatic battlefield maneuvers, but by systemic competence, the ability to integrate political guidance, international coordination, and military operations on a continental scale. His command style also left a lasting imprint. Eisenhower believed in giving subordinates wide tactical freedom while maintaining strict strategic control. This approach allowed the Allied armies to adapt rapidly to battlefield conditions while still operating within a coherent plan. His calm temperament, steady judgment, and refusal to personalize disagreements made him uniquely effective in an environment where national interests, personalities, and egos could easily have fractured the alliance. By the end of the European War, Eisenhower had proven that leadership at the highest level requires more than technical knowledge. It demands patience, discipline, diplomacy, and a deep understanding of human behavior. He forged a unified force from nations with different cultures, different strategies, and different political aims. He managed crises without panic, conflicts without rupture, and victories without self-promotion. Eisenhower's accomplishments made him the central architect of Allied success in Western Europe. His decisions shaped the outcome of D-Day, the battle for France, the defense against the Ardennes offensive, and the final destruction of German military power. The operational and political structure he sustained under enormous pressure became one of the defining achievements of modern warfare. Through his command, he demonstrated that the strongest weapon in a coalition war is not a single army or machine, but the ability to unify millions of people behind a common purpose. Eisenhower's influence extended far beyond the battlefield because he understood that war is ultimately a test of national will, organizational strength, and political cohesion. In Europe, he coordinated not only the military forces of multiple nations, but also their expectations, fears, and ambitions. This required constant negotiation with British leadership, especially Churchill and the chiefs of staff, who often pressed for offensive operations that served British strategic aims. Eisenhower listened carefully, adjusted where appropriate, but always protected the larger goal, a synchronized advance that overwhelmed German capacity to resist. He also managed the American side of the coalition with equal discipline. Roosevelt expected rapid progress but understood the complexity of commanding a multinational force. Eisenhower provided honest assessments rather than optimistic promises. His credibility with political leadership allowed him to operate with remarkable freedom for a commander of his rank. He shaped Allied priorities without becoming entangled in political maneuvering, a balance few leaders in modern history have achieved so effectively. As the war expanded across France, Belgium, and the Low Countries, Eisenhower emphasized that success depended on systems, not individual heroes. He transformed vast logistical networks into engines of sustained pressure. The Red Ball Express supplied armor and infantry across narrowing roads and expanding fronts. Air transport moved critical items when ports failed to provide sufficient throughput. Repair depots rebuilt damaged vehicles by the thousands. Eisenhower monitored these flows as closely as he monitored battlefield reports. He believed that the general who mastered logistics would control the campaign, and he was correct. Eisenhower's approach to command relied heavily on clear communication. He issued concise directives that emphasized intent rather than micromanagement. He insisted that commanders understand the purpose behind orders so they could adapt in changing circumstances. This philosophy allowed Patton, Bradley, Hodges, Montgomery, and others to operate with speed and autonomy while still contributing to a unified operational design. The coherence of the Allied advance in 1944 reflected the clarity of Eisenhower's instructions. His calm demeanor also served as a stabilizing force. Even when operations stalled or suffered setbacks, he projected confidence. Subordinates described him as firm but approachable, a leader who listened and made decisions without hesitation. His ability to diffuse tensions among senior commanders preserved unity during critical phases of the campaign. When disagreements threatened to escalate into open conflict, Eisenhower reasserted the common mission and reminded his generals of their shared responsibility. Eisenhower's strategic judgment was grounded in an understanding of Germany's weakening condition. He recognized that the enemy lacked fuel, trained replacements, and industrial resources. His purpose was not to defeat German units piecemeal, but to collapse the entire Western Front simultaneously. By sustaining pressure along a broad axis, he forced the Germans to respond everywhere at once. They had neither the mobility nor the strength to counter this method. The collapse that followed the Rhine crossings in 1945 confirmed the effectiveness of his approach. When the war ended, Eisenhower faced a different kind of challenge. Determining how to address the immense human suffering uncovered across liberated regions, he ordered that food supplies be increased for civilians in devastated areas. He supported relief agencies and encouraged coordination with allied governments. He also directed military units to assist in the recovery of detainees, prisoners of war, and forced laborers. Eisenhower recognized that victory without humanitarian action would hollow out the meaning of the Allied cause. He also made decisions intended to shape long-term stability. He supported the reconstruction of German administrative structures under strict oversight. He ensured that security forces were deployed to maintain order and prevent reprisals. His occupation policies balanced firmness toward former Nazi officials with the practical need to restart essential services. His perspective was that a stable, functioning Germany was necessary for a stable post-war Europe. Eisenhower's career after the war reflected the respect he had earned worldwide. As Army Chief of Staff, he helped oversee demobilization while ensuring that the United States retained the strategic capacity required in the emerging Cold War environment. He later became the first Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, tasked with organizing the defense of Western Europe. The coalition-building skills he developed during World War II made him uniquely qualified for this role. By the time he entered the presidency in 1953, Eisenhower had accumulated unmatched experience in global strategy, alliance management, and the coordination of national resources. His wartime leadership shaped the doctrines and institutions that guided American and Western defense policy for decades. Many of his operational principles, such as unity of command, integrated logistics, and combined arms coordination, foundational to modern military planning. Legacy remains tied to the essential. The fact that he commanded the largest coalition force in history and led it to victory without losing its cohesion. He managed logistics on a continental scale, coordinated diverse military cultures, and faced a determined enemy with patience and clarity. His decisions shaped the course of the war in Europe and ensured that the Allied effort remained unified from the beaches of Normandy to the heart of Germany. Command in Europe demonstrated that modern war is no longer won by individual brilliance alone, but by the ability to integrate vast structures, political, industrial, and military into a single operational machine. He understood that conflicts of continental scale required not just courage and aggression, but discipline, diplomacy, and the mastery of systems. His leadership during the Normandy invasion and the subsequent Continental Campaign reflected this reality. Every major decision he made balanced military necessity with alliance politics, resource limitations, and long-term strategic consequences. He also recognized the importance of adaptability. When conditions deteriorated, such as the weather delays before D-Day or the German counteroffensive in the Ardennes, Eisenhower did not cling to rigid plans. He adjusted quickly, reallocating forces, shifting priorities, and empowering subordinates to act decisively. This flexibility prevented setbacks from becoming crises and allowed the Allies to sustain momentum even in moments of uncertainty. His approach ensured that the initiative rarely left Allied hands once Normandy was secured. Eisenhower's wartime experience also highlighted the central role of communication in high command. He cultivated trust by maintaining transparent relationships with political leaders and military commanders alike. He communicated intent clearly and expected the same from those below him. His ability to translate strategic objectives into operational directives and to keep multiple armies synchronized across thousands of kilometers was one of his greatest strengths. This clarity created unity at every level, from the Supreme Headquarters to the smallest frontline units. One of Eisenhower's most significant contributions was his refusal to allow personal rivalries to undermine coalition unity. He dealt with strong personalities Montgomery, Patton de Gaulle, Churchill, yet kept the alliance focused on a shared goal. He absorbed criticism without responding in kind, diffused conflicts before they grew, and reminded his subordinates that the enemy, not each other, was their target. This ability to manage egos without diminishing authority made him irreplaceable as Supreme Commander. Eisenhower's emphasis on logistics also shaped the campaign's outcome. He viewed supply as the foundation of operations, not an afterthought. He insisted that the flow of fuel, ammunition, and manpower matched the scale of the strategic vision. When shortages limited movement, he adjusted operational plans rather than forcing unrealistic advances. This respect for logistical reality prevented disasters and kept the Allied armies positioned to exploit every opportunity. His understanding of the material dimension of war became a key lesson for future military planners. After the war, Eisenhower's leadership principles continued to influence global strategy. His presidency emphasized stability, collective defense, and cautious, measured responses to international crises. He believed that the alliances forged during World War II, particularly NATO, were essential for preventing future conflict. His wartime experience had shown him the value of unity among democracies, and he carried that conviction into his political career. He advocated for economic strength, technological development, and the avoidance of unnecessary wars. In assessing Eisenhower's legacy, historians emphasize that his greatness was not rooted in dramatic battlefield victories, but in something more enduring: the ability to create order from complexity. He managed the largest amphibious operation in history, coordinated multinational armies with competing agendas, and oversaw a campaign that liberated Western Europe. His balanced temperament, strategic patience, and focus on coalition harmony made him uniquely suited for the role. Under his command, the Allies executed operations of unprecedented size with cohesion rarely seen in war. Eisenhower's contribution to the defeat of Nazi Germany cannot be measured solely through troop movements or battle outcomes. It lies in how he shaped the Allied effort as a whole. He built a unified command structure, ensured that resources were used efficiently, and kept the alliance together through both triumphs and crises. His decisions set the rhythm of the campaign from Normandy to the Rhine. Without his leadership, the vast and often conflicting elements of the Allied war machine might never have achieved the synchronized force required to overpower Germany. By the war's end, Eisenhower had become a symbol of steadiness, competence, and coalition strength. His leadership reflected the core ideals of the Allied cause: cooperation, discipline, and resolve. He proved that victory in a war of such scale required not only military skill but also the ability to interpret political realities, manage immense complexity, and maintain unity across nations. His command stands as one of the most significant achievements in the history of modern warfare.